So here we are, still playing the first turn. Second card coming up on Kingdom of Heaven, first scenario. For the Muslims in this scenario, it looks like combining forces and trying to fight the Crusaders is going to be largely a difficult and maybe almost impossible chore. Unfortunately, I have a card that I like here. Not that one. Sitting on my hands. Dispute over division of booty. Orcs quarrel over division of spoils. A Christian player removes 3 units, his choice, from an unbesieged army of the Muslim player's choice to the force pool. The Christian can discard a card to reduce this loss by the operations value. Now what's cool about this is it'll give me a replacement card, but what's bad about it is the Christian army is settled here in Armenia. I don't really want to hit that army because 2 of those units can be these crappy Byzantine ones, which won't hurt me much at all, which won't hurt the Crusaders much at all. So they wouldn't have to discard a big card, or they'd just lose one important army. As an alternative, I could go for this rear force, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on that card. That's the card I want to play, but I want to wait and see what develops. Instead, what I'm going to do is, I guess, try to gather my forces to face the Crusaders. Largely, what I'm worried about is the possibility of the revolt here, the Shia uprising. So I'm kind of thinking I want to get things like Aleppo to come into play with their forces early, just in case things go badly. So I'm going to try to move myself forward. Okay, so the Crusader player is going to launch a siege, and the way they do this is they're going to play for a siege event the attacker value, sappers and miners, reduce defender resistance value by 3. That drops them down to a 1 here, which is pretty weak. That's going to be 1 shift against at most. Now, the Muslims have a chance to react, but when I look through their cards, they have only attacker cards, and thus cannot. Now, the Christians could play another card, but they don't want to play too many cards on this 1 minor siege here. So what they're going to do instead is they're going to launch an immediate attack. So we will go check that out. And let's see what we got for strength. The combat strength will be 3 plus any garrison, as noted. And the attacker had 42. That hasn't changed, I don't think. So we'll be looking on here. Now there's a resistance value which drops them down to the 40 level, but that's not really a big deal. And we have modifications to the die roll. On the siege assault, we get a shift. The besieged gets +2 to the die roll, but the attacker gets +1. I'll use red for the Crusaders again. So the defender got an 8 over on 3. They're going to cause 2-step losses, whereas the attacker took 5. They cause 8-step losses, so they're going to take the castle here. And that, gotta figure out where to put them. Drops there. We gotta find a Crusader castle to put in its place. And I gotta figure out if there's some sort of garrisoning requirement for that. They may lose a strength point, but they also lose 2 steps, and I'll take that in the Byzantine units because I can. And the Muslims, on their first turn, moved Dukak up here, leaving Damascus empty. That's a risky situation, but we'll see. That's far from the front, so I think it's safe. And then after the siege, they moved Kerboga up using the local sympathizers card, which allows them to move without attrition. So they were able to just slide right over. So now they've got a significant amount of force facing the Crusaders. Now they still don't want to do pure battle. The original Crusades game by Berg, if you got Kerboga into place, he could probably take on the Crusaders with a fair fight. But here, because of the shadowing rules, they're able to simulate what really happened a little bit better than just all-out battle rules were able to. So this is kind of an interesting modifier to me. I'm interested in looking and seeing how Onward Christian Soldiers handles this, whether it uses the old style or whether this was perhaps drawn from that. I don't think it has a shadowing type situation. I think that's a really, really clever move, addition to the rules here. It's one of the things that impresses me most about this game. Okay, so now the Crusaders under Toulouse, and that's the whole force, have marched forward to face Kerboga. Kerboga wants to do that shadowing action though, so what he's going to do is try to avoid battle. And he's at all cav, so it's -1. He's not entering through a stronghold, but he has no cavalry. Yeah, that's if your army has no cavalry and opponents. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Besieging, but shadowing would create a +1 if there was cav. There's none for the Christians. So right now he's got a -1. His base is 2 for his tactical battle rating, so he brings that up to a 3 essentially. And he rolls successfully, so he can withdraw. Now I don't believe he can withdraw over the mountain pass, so he's going to pull away this way, allowing the Christians in. Now, the Christians could make a call for surrender here. If they do so, there's a penalty. So let's take a quick calculation on that base resistance factor here. Leader in the stronghold, none. 1 to 2 steps inside city, no. Okay, so it's a 3-pointer, but can't find that penalty, and there's this damn gloss which makes it almost impossible for me to read with my eyes. Active leaders battle rating 3 or 4, yes, so that gives me a +1. But the enemy army with at least 50% strength, I don't know if that's the case. This is only 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's not 50%, so I'm going to call for the surrender. I think I've got a 1-point advantage because of my leader. I'm not sure if I counted that in last time. But we counted the resistance factor, which is the base 3. And I've got a -1 to the die roll, or +1, +1. I get a 6, so it surrenders. And it just falls automatically. Now I think that's going to be a reduced fortress as well. We've moved 2 spaces. I'll be back after checking that because we're still going to handle this, intrinsic action. So indeed, the Crusaders get the location, but at half strength. Now they've moved 1, 2. They get to continue their movement because the castle fell with a high enough roll. Turns out it's just 1 higher than needed. The rules have essentially a typo in them, and it seemed like it was the case. But essentially, if you roll 1 higher than you needed with a castle, you can keep moving. Otherwise, it looked like castles always allow you to keep moving. Whatever. So anyway, we went 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this I don't believe causes an attrition. It's only the rough terrain that does. But these guys have the option to move, and they can continue shadowing. They can't move into here, but I believe that the shadowing continues as long as they stay within 1 space of it. Let's check that out. No matter what, they have shadowed the opponent. It's just that they're not taking the movement, from what I understand. Well, I'll pause while I look it up, because trying to deal with these in this lighting, I've got to tilt the rules and try to read them. It's not exactly clear to me. First of all, they're no longer shadowing if they don't move. That is clear. But it's not clear to me that they succeeded in shadowing because they didn't follow the army upper. The way the rules are written, however, a shadowing army is assumed to be skirmishing. Such activity wears down. To keep things simple, the effects are the same regardless of how much time a force actually spends shadowing. I think it shadowed from the moment it declared it was shadowing. I don't think it actually has to follow the enemy. That's just free movement that you can get. I may be wrong, but that's how I'm going to interpret it, in part so that we can see the attrition effect here. So the shadowing force has to take attrition, and it's got it's got 4 units. Let's see how that works out. Looks like we'll just roll straight up on the 6 table, and on a 5 or a 6 we take damage. Oh yay, we do. So we lose 2 steps, and I don't see a reason not to take them both off the same unit. For the simple fact, well, yeah, I'm increasing my opponent's damage too. So yeah, I'll take them off 2 different units and keep the damage higher. Alright, so now let's take a look at what the Catholics have to deal with though. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 units here. Plus 4 brings them up to 16 for the attrition. The plus 4 being the shadowing force. There's no modifier here, except, you know, and they roll a 4. They're also going to take 2 hits. I'm going to lose the remainder of my Byzantine units there. They're not worth anything anyway at this point, and I can't think of anything better to kill. Alright, of course that makes the card that the Muslims are holding more interesting for them. So that's the end of their movement, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're in this kind of interesting position between Antioch and Aleppo with forces all around us. We really do have to worry here, but I think we've got the massive force to be able to defeat any of these. We'll see whether Kerboga can maybe gather together a big enough force to put a fight on us against Aleppo. Indeed, the Muslims play the dispute over the division of booty. It says draw a replacement card if played as an event, so they get an extra card for themselves. Sounds like it'll be good for them. The Catholics reduced it by 2, the damage. They had to take a full unit of Crusaders, though, because of it. They could have reduced it completely. They could have ignored it. All different options. They could have played a 1 card, but you know, they got a couple of leaders with 1 strategy ratings. They think they can use those if they win the battle to maybe grab Edessa or something very cheaply. On the other hand, the 2 card, while it's sufficient to move their main army, their 3-point cards are interesting, like this coordinated advance. So really the question became between the 2 card and just taking all the losses. Taking all the losses sounds really expensive, so I didn't want to do it. But I am in a hurry to get down to Jerusalem as quickly as possible, and I don't know if that's going to happen. Oh my. The Crusaders played this coordinated advance, and moving half the forces, I moved Toulouse downward into Antioch. Now, there's a garrison there. That made it 3 of 4, 5 strength, with a plus in the resistance factor because of the steps inside of there, with a +1 to the die roll because of the leader, and the enemy armies are too small to affect things. So the resistance factor was what? 3, 4, 5. I needed a 5 or higher to succeed because of the +1. It happened to happen. I got a 6. This isn't a castle, so I can't keep moving. But Antioch has just fallen. All these forces have been destroyed. I gotta check Ducat to see what happens to him. And 5 victory points have changed. Have gone to the Crusaders. Now, Antioch was sort of the point at which the Crusaders just reached their lowest stage in this first crusade, where they were stuck outside forever. And then when they finally got in, Kerboga showed up just a little too late to break their siege and set up an immediate siege of them. One of the more exciting and, you know, I don't know, almost theatrical elements of the whole, or episodes of the whole crusade, with, you know, the true cross being found, or not the true cross, what was it, the lance being found in order, yeah, supposedly, and you know, motivating the Christian armies to come charging out and actually defeating Kerboga's army. Within the game terms, it looks like, well, the Crusaders could probably have held off Kerboga, but it definitely doesn't, you know, in the story of the time, it doesn't feel that way. Anyway, I got to figure out what happens with him, and we got to move good old Godfrey, who's hard to move. I don't know where to send him. I think we're going to follow the same basic path to try and avoid too much attrition. 1, 2... Yeah, this doesn't look too much worse. We're going to head out to Edessa with him. He's got a long path there, though. I'm just trying to figure out if he's he's a decent person to send to Edessa. He's got such a long trip no matter what. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we'll send him there. He has to take an attrition hit, and he has 4 units with him, so we'll do that real quick. He went through a harsh terrain. Ooh, mountain passes do cause attrition. Shit. I may have screwed that up at some point. The movement down from here. Okay. I didn't realize that. Oh, he has the Crossing Asia Minor one, actually, that he has to take. So that's just a 5 attrition added to his 4. It's going to be 9. He doesn't have to worry about the other effects because that's sort of the maximum effect. And he's not damaged. Were there any modifiers there? No. Okay. So that was not too bad. But I've got to watch that because I think I may have avoided giving the Crusaders an attrition roll. They should have. In fact, I'm pretty sure. Let me make sure of that for certain, and I'll retroactively take care of that. As well, I have to figure out what happens to Dukak. Oddly enough, crossing a mountain pass does not cause an attrition roll. That's very clearly actually called out in this glaring with the light off. The crossing a mountain pass does not trigger an attrition roll itself, but it penalizes you heavily if you had to make one, which is kind of odd because it would make sense if you're moving into mountain territory that it would penalize you, but I'm not sure how much sense it makes if your attrition roll is from some other effect far away, why the mountain pass would. As far as I can tell, we just make a leader loss check on Dukak because it's the same as if it fell to an assault, and in that case it's a successful assault of an unblockaded stronghold, so it's at -2 to the die roll instead of -4. And we get an 8, which means he also is now a prisoner. Now these prisoners can be gotten back by the Muslim giving cards up on his turn. Alright, well, that's the Catholic turn we've pulled up to here. I guess we'll go over to the Muslims. And the Muslims had a very good card to play, one that I have no way of getting around. Trouble in Europe, playable if there's more than one Crusader leader on the map. One such leader, and in this case the Crusaders picked Tancred as the weakest of the leaders. Godfrey was a definite interest because of his expensive cost to activate, but he I don't know. His troops would be left behind. And at D6 steps, ended up losing 5 steps. That's 2 whole units, and 1 more step are actually just removed from play, not just in the dead box. I'm not sure if anything can come back from the dead box, but whatever. So that took a significant bite out of the Crusader army at this point. Now the Crusaders are going to have to leave a leader at Antioch. For now, they're going to make that our good old Byzantine leader. And in a sense, that's one of the interesting things that we've given it over to the Byzantine control. Very historical, but it was one of the things the Byzantines were asking. So the Crusader army, what there is of it, and it's barely big enough to avoid the siege penalties, marched on, grabbed Tortosa with a call for surrender, but was unable to get Sicily that way, or Tripoli that way, and they were kind of hoping maybe to push close enough to have a shot at Damascus or something. Well, they don't have that, and now the Muslims have an interesting question. Do they want to try to pull down and defend against this area, which is really kind of vital to them? Because if Jerusalem falls, and this path has been taken, let's take a look at what we've got for points. We've currently got 8. Tripoli brings us to 10. Acre brings us to 15. We don't even have to go off into Damascus and Aleppo and all that. So if we take Jerusalem, the Crusaders get enough points. On the other hand, there's the, well, we can kind of take points away from them by attacking these kind of weaker places here. Now, they left some Crusaders behind in garrison, because if you don't garrison things, cities, they're liable to fall back, and those points would become valueless then to the Crusaders because they just lose them. Hard decision. We'll see what the Muslims do. Realizing I'm screwing up, not too surprising. Moving into these cities that don't surrender, I have to make attrition rolls. Now, Carboiga moved into Antioch, but let me take care of the Tripoli one first. What we have there is 3, 4, 5, 6 units. And let's look at the attrition modifier for that. Enemy stronghold is +2 per space entered. So that puts me up to 8. And I roll a die. And that would have caused no losses. Let's look at the Muslim one. They have, I think, 4 units there. 2, 3, 4. And that puts them up to a 6. And they also are fine. At the low end of the table, it's unlikely to do a lot of damage, but whatever. At this point, the Crusaders are going to do something we haven't seen yet. They need an effect on Tripoli. Starvation, I don't think, is very effective. So they're going to throw away this card in order to draw a random possible event. They got Greek fire. This would cause a problem. It draws a replacement card. I don't think that happens unless you use it as the event. I think you have to actually play it yourself for that to happen. I'm not sure. It's not clear because the others don't say that that's the case. So that leaves the Muslims with a couple of cards to play, and we'll take care of them quickly. I think they're going to be trying to break Antioch. So the Muslims played a couple of cards to draw a random siege event card. And in both cases, they got to reduce the resistance factor in Antioch. It's down to only a 3. That's not very good. The Crusaders could certainly come back up and attack them. That would mean giving up a Tripoli, though. And they might get away and then be shadowing the Crusader army. So it's kind of a tough situation for the Crusaders. They have to balance what the chances of losing Antioch. It's pretty low right now. Carboga doesn't have much. But if Ridwan comes in too, there's maybe enough strength that if the value gets low enough on the resistance factor, there's a significant chance that an assault might carry. Right now, it's not even worth making one. So now we're at the demobilization. Only the Muslims are affected by this in this scenario because they're the only ones in the world. They're the only ones in their own homeland, basically. So let's take a quick look. Alright, I'm going to have to page through and find that. I'll be back in a bit. Well, the high command rating of Carboga and Ridwan's low troop strength means that the Muslims didn't have to actually demobilize anything. And they don't want to, because they want to bring their stuff in from the force pool as they can. So that's actually the end of the turn from what I can see. Unless there's something I'm missing that's here. I don't know, I can't find it. Demobilization, end of turn, victory. Yeah. So we'll push the turn marker ahead to turn 2. And, well, we'll load this one up.